Hello everyone, welcome back to the online learning program of Vistas. This is Surya Tilagam, Assistant Professor of English. Today we are going to see the course Literary Forms, Week 4, Lecture 1. Today's topic is lyric poetry. First, what is a lyric poem? Lyric poem is a musical poem which expresses the poet's feelings and emotions. As the great Greek poet Aristotle divided the major poetry into three types. The first one is narrative poetry, and lyrical poetry, and dramatic poetry. And what are all the narrative poetic forms? Epic, ballad, monologues, tales, metrical forms, and romances. And in the lyrical poetry, elegy, ode, sonnet. And the dramatic poetry is divided into further categories: tragedy, comedy, tragicomedy, closed drama, and masque. And now we'll focus on the major three types of poetry and what do they describe. The dramatic poetry dramatizes the action through dialogue or sometimes monologue. A single character would speak on the stage. But lyrical poetry expresses the personal thoughts, emotions of the poet. Whereas narrative poetry tells a story. Say for example the epic. It tells a story in poetic form. Now let's see the difference among the major three types. Narrative poetry or epic poetry, it narrates a story through verse. Say for example, the ancient Greek ode, Homer's epic poetry is. Now let's see the differences among the three major types of poetry: narrative poetry, dramatic poetry, and lyric poetry. This narrative poetry is otherwise known as epic poetry, which narrates a long story through verse. Say for example, the ancient Greek poet Homer's epic poem Odyssey. It tells the story, adventurous story of Odyssey. And if you take dramatic poetry is nothing but drama which is in verse. So here we see the story enacted on the stage through the dialogue delivery by the characters. Then lyric poetry, it is basically a form of song which is composed along with a musical accompaniment. So it will be music, and it will convey the emotions, the powerful emotions of the speaker. Now let's see what are all the features of a lyric poem. First, a lyric poem is of very short length. Okay, it is a short poem. So the shortness, brevity is one of the major features of a lyric poem. And then the other signature feature is it conveys the emotions, feelings, thoughts of the poet or the speaker. So it is completely personal. Personal thoughts or feelings or ideas are being expressed through this lyric poem. And it is always spoken in the first person point of view. So the speaker, it may be the poet himself or some other persona, but the person who speaks in the lyrical poem conveys or expresses his own ideas or viewpoints or thoughts about somebody or something. Okay, so it is highly the personal emotions and ideas expressed through the first person point of view. So the speaker, the poet will speak, yes, I saw this, I experienced this. So this is called the first person point of view. Say for example ode, all the odes will be in the form of an address, right? So the speaker is addressing to some object or somebody, some abstract quality. Yes. Then the third feature of a lyric is musical. This is one of the most important and defining characteristic of a lyric. But ancient lyrical form, that is when it originated in Greek, it was meant for singing. Lyric was a song sung with the accompaniment of the musical instrument called lyre. So lyric will be always musical, but later this lyrical poem was meant for written, reading and listening, for reading. But even then, the later poets introduced some certain stylistic devices in order to give the musical quality. So anyhow, lyric poem is always musical, whether it is composed or written, whether it is being listened or read out. Then another important feature of a lyric poem is it expresses an idea or it describes a scene. So it may be an expression of an idea or an emotion, or sometimes it may describe a scene but from the first person point of view. And yes, musical quality, this is one of the defining characteristic of the lyric poem. Now let's see which poetic forms come under the category of lyric. Actually, as Aristotle classified, lyric poem includes the three major forms of poetry called elegy, ode and sonnet. But these are all directly adopted from Greek and Latin origin into English literature. But yet there are 4 more other lyrical forms of poetry which didn't have the direct English origin, but some other countries, they originated from other culture or other countries, and later on they were all adopted into English poetry, English language. So I have included those 4 categories also here. Okay, but in English literature, the major types of lyric poem include elegy, ode and sonnet. Okay, now let's see one by one. First, elegy. What is an elegy? Elegy is a poem of lamentation. Usually, if a person dies, the beloved people, the one who loves the dead or the deceased, will write or compose a poem of mourning. Okay, so elegy is a song, a poem of mourning or lamentation, and it is sung or composed at the death of someone beloved, and it describes the stages of grief, how the speaker feels sorry for the death of the person who is being spoken about. And what is the structure of an elegy? It is always written in quatrains. Quatrains means the 4-line stanza, and it uses the metrical form iambic pentameter, and it follows the rhyme scheme ABAB. It is of Greek origin, but in English literature, most of the poets have written elegiac form. To name the most important elegy in English literature is Lord Tennyson's In Memoriam, which he wrote for his friend Arthur Henry Hallam's death. And another important elegy in English literature is John Milton's Lycidas, which he wrote for the death of Edward King, his schoolmate. And this comes under the category of pastoral elegy. Okay. Now, the next form of lyric poem is sonnet. Sonnet is one of the most favorite of all the readers and writers, and sonnet is a short poem of 14 lines. It had its origin in Italy. Petrarch was said to be the father of sonnets, and he introduced this sonnet form, 14-line poem form, in Italian language, and later on it was adapted into English literature. During the Renaissance period, it came to English literature. And Petrarchan sonnet followed the rhyme scheme ABAB, CD, EF, and GG. So it was divided into 3 quatrains and 1 rhyming couplet. So the quatrains means the 4-line stanza. The first quatrain has the rhyming scheme of AB, there is a repetition. and the second quatrain has CD CD, and the third quatrain has this rhyming scheme EF EF, and finally the rhyming couplet GG. So actually this is the rhyme scheme adopted by Shakespeare, but the original Italian sonnet had 2 parts only. First 8-line octave, and the second part is known as sestet, that is 6 lines. And what is iambic pentameter? Iambic pentameter is a metrical form where the unstressed syllable is followed by a stressed syllable. Okay, that is called iambic pentameter. And what is the emotion that is conveyed in a sonnet? Usually a sonnet will reflect one idea, a single emotion. There will not be any deviation. Okay? And towards the end of the poem, maybe in the rhyming couplet or in the sestet, there will be a turn of thought. So the first stanza will give some, will talk about or will express some problem, and maybe in the sestet form there will be a solution or a kind of change of idea will be there in the concluding parts. Yes, now let's see how sonnet form came into English literature. It was brought into English literature by Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard, that is Earl of Surrey. And who are all the famous sonneteers in English? Edmund Spenser, Sir Philip Sidney, he wrote Astrophel and Stella, and John Donne, and of course William Shakespeare. And we all know William Shakespeare is one of the best sonneteers, and he has written 154 sonnets in total. And we will never forget the sonnet number 118, that is, shall I compare thee to a summer's day. Now let's see the difference between Shakespearean sonnet and Petrarchan sonnet. Petrarchan sonnet, that is the ancient form, Italian form, had 2 parts, that is octave and sestet. Octave has 8 lines and sestet has 6 lines, and it followed the rhyme scheme A B B A, A B B A, C D E, C D E. Whereas Shakespeare's sonnet is divided into 3 quatrains and 1 rhyming couplet. It follows the rhyme scheme A B A B, C D C D, E F E F, and G G. Now let's move on to the next form of lyrical poetry, that is ode. Ode is also of Greek origin, and it is comparatively a longer lyric poem. Sonnet is a short form, and ode is comparatively a longer one. Here ode takes a serious subject. So the subject matter of an ode will be somewhat serious, and the treatment will also, how it is written, it is also some serious or elevated tone, elevated style. And it is elaborate in its stanzaic structure. That means unlike the sonnet which has only 4-line stanza, in ode will have a longer stanza. So it is elaborate, maybe longer stanzaic structure it follows. And what is the subject? The ode may praise or glorify an event or a person, or it may be the nature itself. Say for example, ode to a nightingale, ode on a Grecian urn. So to name a few of the romantic odes. And the ode uses, is ode form is used to express emotions in a rich language. It is so rich, the words, and the descriptive language is so rich because it gives an elevated style to the poem. What is the origin? It is originated in Greece, and originally it was meant for celebrating the athletic victories. Is Greece, which is the home of the Olympic Games, no? So they were all very much interested in the athletics. So this ode form was originally introduced in order to celebrate the victories of the athletic victories in the athletic events. And the classical ode, the form of classical ode, had serious subjects and sincere and reverent tone, very serious tone. And a ode will follow some 3 structures. First, it has 3 parts. The first part is known as strophe. which is the first section of the poem, and the second section is called antistrophe, and the third and final part is known as epode. And this ode form was very much followed and adapted by the Romantic poets in English literature, and the most important Romantic poet who adopted this form is John Keats. And there are many famous odes by Keats, Ode to a Nightingale, Ode on a Grecian Urn, Ode to an Autumn. Then Shelley also wrote an ode. The popular ode by Shelley is Ode to the West Wind, wherein he talks about the rebellious ideas. And William Wordsworth's ode to duty, ode to immortality. And so these are all the three classical forms of lyrical poems, and there are four other lyrical forms of various national origins. First one is ghazal. Ghazal is also an ancient form, but it was not much used in English literature. And this type of poem was constructed with couplets, and there will be repeated words and rhyming words also, which gives musical quality to the poem. And here every couplet is a complete expression. So in each couplet, in every two lines, the expression will be complete. There will not be any continuity to the next one. The first line of every ghazal is end-stopped or passed with a punctuation mark. So that means that is one idea in a couplet. And totally there will be 5 to 15 couplets. Minimum 5 couplets will be there, and if at all it is longer, it may go up to 15 couplets. The lines of a ghazal are all the same length. So every line will have the same length, but they don't follow the proper rhyme scheme. We cannot expect the same rhyme scheme being followed throughout. And another important feature in the ghazal is, towards the end of the poem, the poet will mention his name or signature in the final couplet. So there will be a reference to the author in the poem itself. And where it originated, it was originated in the 17th century Arabia, and now it is being popular among the Iranian, in India and Pakistani musicians. The next type is sestina. Sestina is also it also derives from the Italy. The word sexto means sixth, so that is the reason for the term sestina. So the poem with 6 stanzas and 6 lines each, so that is why the term sestina is given as the title. And here it ends with a 3-line envoi. Okay, so what is an envoi? It is an unrhymed fixed verse form with repeated end words. So envoi is the short stanza at the end of a sestina, and it is based on French origin, but the term is it is derived from the Italian word, but this poetic form belongs to France. And in English literature, Ezra Pound has written some sestina form, and to name one, Sestina Altaforte. And now we'll move on to the next one, villanelle. And this word also derives from Latin. It is a highly structured poem. It is made for 5 3-line stanza, that is 5 tercets followed by a quatrain. And here 2 repeating rhymes and 2 refrains, that is 2 refrains means repeated lines, and 1 with 5 3-line stanzas and 1 final 4-line stanza. That is the structure of this villanelle. And here the rhyme scheme will be ABA for the first 3-line stanzas, and for the quatrain ABAA. This is the rhyming scheme. And here example from the English literature, One Art by Elizabeth Bishop is one of the famous villanelle in English literature. And the last form is panto. It originated in Malaysia. It is a Malaysian poetic form, and it was adopted by the French poets, and later on it was imitated in English literature as well. And what is this poem? this poem has a series of interlocking quatrains. The structure of this poetic form is interlocking quatrains would be there, and the second and the fourth lines of one quatrain become the first and third to the next quatrain. So that's why it's given as interlocked. And here there is no restriction for the length, it may go up to any number of lines. And it follows a fixed rhyme scheme AB, AB. And one example for Pantom is Donald Justice, Pantom of the Great Depression. Yes. So now we have come to the end of the lecture. Let me sum up. In the lecture we have seen what is a lyric poem. Lyric poem is a song sung with the accompaniment of the musical instrument called lyre. You can see the lyre in the picture. And the lyric poem usually expresses the personal feelings and emotions of the poet. And it expresses one idea, single idea. And now let's see what are all the common types of lyric poem we have seen. Sonnet, ode, elegy. This is all classical forms, and the modern forms ghazal within a pantom. Yes. Thank you for listening, and we'll meet in the next video. Thank you.